So in this video we are going to be taking a look at a scenario where the AN Security Council members from WICSO come to the real world. So if you don't know what WICSO is a fictional mapping series by Pro, although if you watch my channel you probably do know what WICSO is. And these are the 9 Security Council members, basically the leading members of the AN, which is WICSO's version of the UN. These countries are Carolina, or as everyone else calls it, America, Mexico, West Africa or Morocco, Greece, Ireland, South Africa, India, Tibet, and China. The AN Security Council members consist of the first and second strongest countries of the world, being Carolina and China. So this will definitely be very interesting to see how this changes the geopolitical stage of the world, as very strong countries like the USA and China have been replaced by the USA and China. So I'm sure that will change a lot. But anyway, if you do end up enjoying this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. We are on the road to 2K, and let's get straight into it. So the very first thing that is going to be taking place is a very interesting political event. So with the AN Security Council members coming in, the UN is going to kind of be reshaped. Now, I'm sure before this there would be a lot of confusion, obviously, as a bunch of countries have just come out of the sky. But the UN is going to be reshaped to allow these members to become replacements of the UN Security Council. So, for example, China, which is going to do something in a minute, is replaced by WICSO China. The USA is probably going to stay as a member, so we could see some weird conflict happening here in a second. The UK is going to be replaced by Ireland, France is chilling, and the rest of these countries will be allowed to become UN Security Council members. But now we're going to be taking a look at some wars. And the very first thing we're going to be looking at is actually two things happening that are very similar to each other at the same time. The USA declares war on Turquoise America. The first thing, the USA declares war on WICSO America. They have just lost a very large portion of their land, and now they are under threat of not being a UN Security Council member anymore, and they absolutely do not want that to happen. So they will be declaring war on the WICSO Americans. Now, this would be very interesting to see, as while America has taken over a lot of the US land, I'm sure they would still have a lot of outreaching influence. However, we are going to be assuming that the USA has kind of lost diplomatic relations. All alliances have been disabled for this video. So this is basically just going to be a one-on-one war. So it starts in this New England area. US forces are going to cross the border into the American country, and they will begin to move down. And in this very vast open area, basically just full of fields, except for here where it's desert, we see a lot of US forces, more specifically Californian forces, able to move in and take over some of this land. As this happens, simultaneously over here in China, we have the communist Chinese government declaring war on WICSO China. Now, this is for very similar reasons, being that they've just lost a lot of land. They hope to gain support from some other countries. One of these countries that does help them out is Mongolia. Mongolia joins the war because they have also kind of been screwed over by this. But unlike the war over here, this war is going to be a lot more one-sided. China actually discovered this plan because, unlike over here, China is really disorganized. So WICSO China was able to pick up on this plan, so they will actually be ready and they will start an invasion into this South China area. In Manchuria, we do see Chinese forces cross the border slowly. They don't really make much progress. However, they are very quickly pushed back. So these guys will be pushed back to the border, and then Chinese forces cross in. But anyway, these Chinese forces will continue, and a rapid invasion of Manchuria takes place. Now, this is happening while other events in this war are taking place, but for the most part, very simply, that land does fall. Over in this part of China, it's a little bit different. There isn't much reason to defend this land. It's very much less valuable than this southern area, which China, they're still absolutely storming into. But anyway, let's go and head back over to the USA. So the USA does manage to see some more success against America. However, over here, the Americans do manage to do very well in New England. However, at this point, a new country is going to be joining in on this war, and that is actually going to be Mexico. In WICSO, of course, these two guys are in an alliance, and these relations obviously come through, so the Mexicans will be pledging their support to America, and this is going to greatly help out the Americans. Mexican forces cross in through the border, and this allows a very large pushback to take place. Over the course of the next few months, the rest of New England will go ahead and fall. All of this American land over here is going to be liberated. This kind of weird disconnected bit over here is going to be encircled, and all of these troops are going to go ahead and fall. After that, just a very big land invasion across takes place. And at this point, the US government is going to go ahead and surrender. And they will go ahead and I'll just colour it in all as American occupation. Oh yeah, also, another thing to note, America, they have the Suez Canal here, so let's just say that's going to cause some issues in a minute. But anyway, back over to China, it's now going extremely well for the Chinese. They are able to fully defeat this southern portion. They fully push back against China and Mongolia, as while these guys did have some terrain advantages, they are for the most part weak, and these guys are going to go ahead and surrender. So let's go ahead and take a look at this joint peace treaty. So in this peace treaty here, let's first go ahead and take a look at China. They annex all of Manchuria and this Mongolian portion as well, and I'm also going to give them this tiny little thing. And they annex a little bit of South China, not too drastic. Also in this peace treaty, Xinjiang, or however you pronounce it, is released, so China and Xinjiang are now separate countries. But heading over to America, we're going to see that the peace treaty is a little bit more drastic. The American country fully annexes all of the contiguous US states, leaving only Alaska and Hawaii, although I am going to give them these two islands as a naval base. But yeah, they fully take it over. They are dead set on becoming the new version of the US. And yeah, they're pretty successful in that sense. But with those few first, after being placed in the world wars out of the way, we can go ahead and take a look at some other events. So over in Africa, with Morocco appearing onto this world map, a lot of these African countries are completely screwed, such as Tunisia, Algeria, they are really screwed now, and Mauritania. So these guys are actually going to be making the decision to join up with Morocco, making them a lot bigger. So they are already a UN Security Council member here because of what I said at the start, but they are also now very strong, very dominant regional power. They also do have Gibraltar down here, so I'm not too sure how the Spanish would feel about that, but yeah, that is what we see at the minute. We also see Pakistan going ahead and being merged into India, and Tibet is going to annex these remnants over here, like so. And then finally, Greece annexes. I feel like Montenegro might actually be able to survive with this, but I don't think Kosovo would, so I'm going to go ahead and give them Kosovo. But next up, we need to go over to the Middle East, because a new war has actually just broken out, and once again is going to be involving the American country. And that is going to be Egypt declaring war on America, hoping to kick them out of the Suez area. Now, the Egyptians, they aren't stupid. They know if they just defeat the Americans here, they can just, come back from Malta or this island, which I do know the name of. I think it's Minorca. So they have their navy ready. They already sent out a very secret naval mission to go over to Malta, as they hope to kind of destroy American naval presence in the Mediterranean, so the Americans can't just, come back and make another landing. So the Egyptians quickly cross into this territory and meet up with the Suez Canal, where a very, very bloody battle takes place along the whole canal. Basically, American forces are just kind of in boats in the canal and on the coast, just mowing down Egyptian forces that are running towards them. But eventually, the Egyptians do overwhelm the American forces, who are forced to flee. And after Malta is landed on, these guys do know that if they go into the Mediterranean, they're probably just going to get destroyed by the Egyptian Navy. So these guys actually flee, these American naval ships. They flee down into the Red Sea and kind of just go. Now, I'm not really sure what would happen to them. I don't know if they would have enough fuel to get back to America, so they'd probably just go over to India for refuge, because India is in America's alliance in WICSO, so they would probably help them out here. But with Egypt taking over Malta here, they then move over and take Minorca. I believe that's what it's called. And after that, they kind of just chill here and wait for a response from the Americans. Now, the Americans, they kind of realize what Egypt did here, and they try and go back. So a very large portion of the American Navy is sent over here through the Mediterranean, and a very large battle takes place over here in the sea, and the American Navy is actually able to defeat the Egyptian Navy. Even though it's not as strong as real life, the American Navy is very strong, obviously not as strong as the US, like I just said, but they are still very strong, so they are able to defeat Egypt. They then make a landing on Minorca and then Malta, and they continue over to Egypt. However, here they find a very big issue. The Egyptians are actually being supplied by a foreign power with extremely large guns on the coast that kind of just shoot at the American ships as they're moving towards the coast. Very similar to what we saw with Brazil. I wonder who's doing that. But the Americans actually really struggle to get towards the coast. They make a landing over here in this part of Egypt, but they are absolutely blasted by like an Egyptian force 4 times bigger than them, and they are pushed off. So they will reluctantly, after failing another landing near the Suez Canal, actually agree to peace with Egypt, and in the peace treaty, they are able to keep Minorca and Malta. However, they are forced to give control of the Suez back over to Egypt. Next up, moving over here to Mexico, we see that the Mexican government actually kind of we're going to assume that they speak the same language as the Mexicans, even though they definitely don't. They would speak Dutch. But we're going to assume that the cultural similarities are similar. That made no sense. But the Mexican government, who is kind of cooked right now, they actually agree to peacefully unite with Mexico. Now, this is not too likely to happen. Also, down here, these guys would have definitely been annexed already. But Mexico is now very big, and the US and Mexico are strong allies here, so that's kind of interesting to see. But next up, we are actually going to be taking a look at something that causes a very big war to happen. So, going over here to Myanmar, currently there is some interesting stuff going on in Myanmar, and India is seeing a great opportunity to gain some land. They did just invade Bangladesh in real WICSO to gain some land, and they see this as an opportunity to gain even more. So, Indian troops who have been training for this for a while cross into the border, even though it's kind of like the territory here, jungles and stuff, it's kind of hard to. And they quickly cross in and cut the country in two. However, it's at the exact same time where China is starting to put their foot down. They don't like the fact that not only America is having a presence in India, which is right near them, they are also now using it to expand in what they see as their sphere of influence, being Myanmar. So the Chinese will launch an invasion in at the same time to kind of stop the Indians doing this. And with it being like very jungly terrain, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. So at multiple points in the terrain, when the Chinese force is moving in, they accidentally cross into Indian occupied territory, as it's very confusing, and a bunch of skirmishes on the border take place. You know, people are going behind trees and stuff, so you don't know what's going on. Like, some Indian forces come out from trees, and the Chinese are like, oh, kill them. They don't know who they are, so it leads to a lot of confusion. India is seeing this as not like faulty skirmishes, they're seeing this as actual planned events. So the Indians are like, hey, what the hell are you doing? Can you leave us alone? And China's like, well, we didn't mean to do this. And India goes over to America, and America is actually, they have been thinking of going to war with China for a while. There are 3 of them in an alliance, being the American side, America, Mexico, and India, whereas China is completely on their own. So the Americans are going to go over to India and say, yeah, we can go get them. So the Indians, after these skirmishes take place, will be declaring war on China. China is like, whoa, 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 we did not mean for this to escalate. Can we just, like, talk about this diplomatically and organise a peace treaty? Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So these Indian forces that were just invading Myanmar, they keep going, they're not going to stop. But then they also turn up north and begin to attack China. Now, one small problem, and that is China is substantially stronger than India here, And there are no current American troops on their soil. Well, I'm sure there are, but not in large quantities. So at the beginning here, China is going to be able to jump the gun. They start an invasion into this very recently occupied Bangladesh area, or very recently invaded Bangladesh area, and they also start an invasion down back into Myanmar. The Americans are then going to start up their navy in Hawaii. They set out and just send a bunch of ships over to China, and they begin to approach the coast. If we were to take a look at the navy's layout over here, it looks something like this. When China went to war with real China, they took over their claims in the South China Sea, and they also have control of the Strait of Malacca. And India, they kind of just have control of the waters around them, nothing really special there. But the American Navy begins to approach. Their first goal is this Chinese island down here. Now, in WICSO, I'm actually not too sure if China owns this island. I've never been able to take a close enough look, but I just gave it to China when I was making my WICSO maps. So we are going to assume that it is theirs. The American forces will make a landing and they will quickly take the island, and they will kind of use this as a base of operations to continue, and yeah, they will just continue to move on. Now, China understands that they need to go after India as quickly as possible because while they have a strong navy, their navy is not too much stronger than the American navy. It's a little bit stronger, but really not too much. So they need to get India out of the way so they can fully focus on it. The Chinese will absolutely blast into India. They just completely blitz through. And because the Americans no longer have access to the Suez Canal, because they just lost it to a war in Egypt, they are not able to move troops through it to get to India quickly, so they can't really supply their ally here. So with that in mind, these Chinese forces are going to be having a, well, not easy time, but a decently good time. And we also see even Myanmar starts to push back against India, and China gives up this land back over to them to agree to work with Myanmar. So Myanmar is going to be launching an invasion into Indian territory and taking over this remaining area. After this, the Chinese are then going to be crossing into core Indian territory. But it's at this point where a few naval battles are actually starting to take place as the American Navy reaches up with the Chinese one and they start to scrap. The American Navy first tries to launch an invasion to take these islands. It goes well at first, but then they get absolutely blasted back by the Chinese Navy. I should probably stop saying blasted because I say it way too much. But down south, it goes a bit better for the American Navy as they are able to take some of the waters around Taiwan. They then proceed to make a landing on Taiwan, which it goes okay. They attempt to use this to cut the island in half and then take the southern portion and then the northern portion. However, when they try and do this encirclement, it does get pushed back and they almost get pushed off the island completely. However, with another landing taking place up north, this one does get pushed off, but this one up north is a lot more successful and they are able to take a good portion of the island. The American Navy then proceeds to encircle the island fully, which is extremely hard to do, and it does cost a lot of ships. In fact, 2 of the Americans' aircraft carriers do get sunk during this, and 3 battleships as well, but they are able to take it after that. And then the American Navy begins to move up north towards these islands. Now, I did say earlier that the American Navy is not as strong as the Chinese, and that is true in current WICSO. However, when America invaded the USA, they did take over the USA's Navy, and that is really helping them out here, and China was not expecting them to be this strong, and that is of course why. Now with even more ships moving across, because obviously they didn't take every single ship in one go, more ships are arriving slowly, they are able to encircle and take these islands right here, and they then approach and begin to bombard some parts of the Chinese mainland. While all of this was going on, the Indians had slowly been moving their navy down to the Strait of Malacca, and now they begin to take over these Chinese claims down here. Eventually, they manage to fully kick out the Chinese navy, and the Indians then take it. This isn't everything. Everything isn't going well for the Indians, however, as they, in their main territory, are still being pushed back. However, with China now manning a pretty big coastal force, they are starting to slow down pretty heavily. The American Navy kind of just moves down into the Southeast Asian area and takes all of the waters here. and they also begin to move up into the Yellow Sea. And every single day, the Chinese Navy is being pushed back several kilometers. It gets so bad to the point where the Chinese Navy is basically separated as the Americans take control of all the naval waters up to the coast and don't allow these boats to do anything. They kind of just encircle them, and these guys are pushed back into their harbours where they are bombed and destroyed, so I will colour that in as American. And it's here where the first American landings take place. On this little jutted out bit, an American landing happens, and these guys begin to rapidly move in. This isn't only American forces, it's also Mexican forces, which is why they're able to do so well. And China is starting to have a lot of stress put on its military. At this point, with pretty much no reason to be in the war, Myanmar leaves, and they just note out of this war. They get some land out of it as well, so that's good for them, I guess. However, the Indians will now start to move back into the Chinese occupied land in their country. Back over in China, these American forces are going to be continuing to do well, taking some land. Now, you might be thinking the original Chinese country down here would join in on the war, and they actually won't be doing so. These guys, they're not communist anymore. When China beat them in the war, they forced them to have a democratic government, which is actually quite pro-Chinese, so they do stay out of it, so that's a bit better for China, but this war is still not going too well for them. The Americans make a second landing up here, and they fully consolidate this coast and begin to move up this southern area. Over in the Yellow Sea, we see at the Shandong Peninsula, the Chinese Navy is once again cut up, and the American forces now fully go towards the coast. The navies aren't really necessary to show anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. But the Americans now have complete dominance over the coast of China, except for a tiny little bit up here. So with this, they will make a landing over here on the Shandong Peninsula. Now, unlike down here, this area the Americans see and it like a stupid amount of resistance. This is a lot closer to the Chinese capital being like right here. The first landing was here, but this landing is much, much closer. Although with American forces now actually approaching the capital, China will be diverting a lot of forces down here to push this advance back. Over in India, we see the tide of the war continuing to shift in India's favour, as they now approach into Bangladesh and into kind of Bhutanese land up here. And after a pretty big Indian resistance force pops up over here, this whole area is going to go back over to India, and these guys are now invading into China. Over in the Shandong Peninsula, the Americans use like napalm techniques to kind of just bombard and destroy all the infrastructure here. Now, while this is kind of good for China as it provides some natural cover for city, like ruined city guerrilla warfare, it does make it so that the infrastructure is kind of just not there to really fight in. So the Americans breeze through this area, and they even make another landing extremely close to the Chinese capital, which is very threatening. In fact, it's so threatening that these guys are absolutely just destroyed. They pummel them and they kick them off China. However, down south, that doesn't get rid of the fact that the Americans are still moving up north. After a few more months of fighting, all of this land comes under control of the Americans, and all of this, like, I guess newly annexed Bangladesh land comes under the control of India. Knowing now that they're kind of cooked, the Chinese will have one final last-ditch attempt. Basically, just send everything down into this American advance to hopefully kick them out of your country, which is very unlikely, and then use all of those forces to push back India. The Chinese attempt to do this, but at this point they've basically been exhausted by war, and the front line down here has like twice as many troops as they do on it. So this advance doesn't really last long, and the Americans are able to recover very quickly, and then they begin to push back. They meet up with this river, which is where the Chinese capital is, and begin to approach it and begin to siege the city. Seeing this, the people of China are not too happy with what's going on, especially because the Shandong landing is also approaching, and the city is kind of encircled. The city is like this, so they're not encircled over here, but they're about to be. With these two landings connecting up, the capital city of China then does fall along with this land, and after this, and with India kind of just breezing through the countryside using modern warfare tactics, the Chinese are going to go ahead and surrender. So let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. So in this peace treaty here, it might not look like too much has happened, but there are actually quite a few big changes. First of all of the WICSO Bangladeshi land goes over to India. So China is basically kind of just reverted to how they were at the start of this video, but not really. This Taiwan becomes part of America. The Strait of Malacca down here, it comes under control of America, and it seems to be like America has a big thing for straits. First in WICSO it was the Panama, then it was the Suez, now the Strait of Malacca down here. Taiwan becomes American, if I hadn't already said that, and the Shandong area as well, and all of these Chinese islands. Furthermore, China has to pay a lot of war reparations over to the 3-point star alliance, being America, Mexico, and India. And yeah, so they are kind of just restricted after this war. So this is a very big loss for China. So with that war ending, basically this just cements as America being the successor to the USA, but a lot more imperialist. But that is going to do it for the majority of this video. There are just a few more events I want to talk about. I've covered every single country doing something except for Ireland and South Africa. So let's go ahead and take a look at South Africa. Now, South Africa is actually going to be taking a very interesting approach. Now, in WICSO, when they were first released, or well, not when they were first released, but after episode 30, when decolonization happened, South Africa invaded a few of their smaller neighbours, and then they decided to ally with them instead. So I'm actually going to be doing something fun here, and that is actually going to be South Africa going to war with their neighbours. I would probably say that in this world, South Africa is the 11th or 12th strongest country, so they are definitely capable of doing this. They quickly invade into the remnants of South Africa, which is already very disorganized, and after that they invade into Namibia and oh my god, how did I forget this country's name? But they invade this country nonetheless, and it falls pretty quickly, and after that Namibia signs peace. So let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Yeah, there is no justice shown towards these guys. South Africa decides to fully annex them, as they really cement themselves as a regional power in Africa. Next up, Ireland, they do... I don't even know what they would do. I don't see them doing anything. Just like in WICSO, I imagine them to be very peaceful. But I think that is actually going to be doing it for this video. If you do want to see a part 2, I don't know what I would do in a part 2. But if you want to see a part 2, please let me know. Also, if you have any other suggestions of what WICSO country or group of countries you want to see come to the real world next, please let me know in the comments. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.